kind of occupied with something, but now I'm back. I was
Yeah,
like
no.
listening to your lectures, but I was not able to be a part of it because I was out most of the time. So,
Hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't see you for a few days, and there are very few of you who are coming regularly and interacting. So I did notice that you are missing. So have we read the convention, CEDAW, for today's discussion? So do you want to share with the others why did we need a CEDAW despite having human rights and we looked at number of general instruments dealing with human rights and securing rights, declaring people to be equal. Why did we need CEDAW? Okay, what I'll do is I'll share the PPT, and then you need to, after having gone through some slides, the background and all, then we will look at what are the range of rights or areas of concerns which have been recognized in CEDAW, and you need to relate them to current legislative positions we have. You would know most of the answers. If you are able to make that connection, then CEDAW makes any sense to us. Otherwise, it's of no use not learning that no, this is ABCD of CEDAW. But how has CEDAW reflected or affected the municipal law? That's the focus in our understanding. So, what are the principles? What are the obligations? That kind of thing. So, let me start the PPT. So, we have looked at some of these international instruments, some more which have been listed here, but we did not talk about earlier. The Declaration on the Protection of Women. Okay, we have first a 1967 declaration, CEDAW, and it will not be called CEDAW, it will be DSAW or whatever that we call, that finally culminated in 1979 in the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Before that, we had the Declaration on the Protection of Women and Children in Emergency and Armed Conflict. So what it does show is that from 67 onwards, specific recognition had come, a special focus had come on women and children. And this has been following even after 79. In 93, we had a declaration on the elimination of violence against women, which kind of changed into there were certain general recommendations also in relation to violence against women. Then we have a Universal Declaration on Democracy and then optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination. So why CEDAW is the first question we ask, and we do, this slide does share those, that despite these various instruments, extensive discrimination continued to exist. And the previous instruments had ignored some of the essential facets which are connected with women. Liability to take note of abuses against women and particular ways in which women were deprived of rights. So we certainly know there are lots of uh, groups of population which are ignored for being a Dalit, for being a minority, being disabled. But women across board is as a category was also being subjected to abuse. There was a failure to understand the issue of sex difference and sex-based difference as constituting a site of vulnerability and inequality. There was inability to consider the critical importance of reproductive rights and freedom for women. So we do know that in the human bodies, the actual reproduction takes place in the body of the woman, and that is critically important for women's survival, development, growth, etc. So there was no focus on curtailing power of state rather than drawing accountability for positive action where women cannot benefit by negative rights. They require positive rights. So these were some of them. And we do know CEDAW was adopted by UN in 1979. By 191 countries it had signed or ratified it in February 2020. India signed in 1980 and then ratified 13 years later. Do you know what is the difference between signing and ratification? What difference does it make? if a country has signed it but not ratified, another country which has signed and ratified.
Ma'am, after ratification, the country is obligated to implement all the principle of the conventions.
Yeah, that's very good. So certainly when we sign, we are saying we have intention to implement. And we ratify, we say we're ready to now actually make laws for changing the municipal law on the subject matter to which we have. And we have Article, I think, 253 in the Constitution, which affects the 253 or 258. You can check what is the exact number, what is the exact number of the article. So there is an article in the Constitution which empowers the central government to legislate on any area across the three lists in the seventh schedule. So that's a major change which happened in the scheme of the thing, that in order to implement the international obligations under the conventions we have ratified, central government can make laws even in the subject areas covered under the state law. So we do know in the Constitution we have the division of power. The legislative areas on state union list, state list, and the concurrent. But if there is a treaty, if there is an international obligations under any convention, then state can, the center can make laws on that subject matter also. The total 30 articles. The most important for us is to understand the meaning given in Article 1, which defines discrimination. And then 2 to 4 cover the general obligations of state. 5 to 16 cover substantive provisions of range of areas of concern, securing rights to women in those subjects. And 17 to 30 are providing for the mechanism for implementation of this convention. So if you read the section, article, it says discrimination against women mean. We will be examining each word which has been given here so that we understand the range of this definition. The moment we say mean, you know the difference between when it says includes and when it says mean. So mean that is we are trying to lay down an exhaustive definition of discrimination against women. So it means any distinction, exclusion, or restriction. So when it says distinction means only you are differentiating, but that's not sufficient. That exclusion and restriction are certainly restrictive words, but distinction does not seem like that there is any problem with that. But it becomes problematic if it results into, because it says which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women. So on the same pattern, we understand Article 15.3, which says special laws can be made for women. It has been interpreted to mean for means they have to be favorable to women and not against them. So special laws for women is not that you can make any law. It categorically means the law which are favorable, which providing something extra to women. So similarly here also they are saying the distinction has to be understood in that sense that discrimination should not be discriminatory. You can distinguish, but it must not be resulting into impairment or nullification of the recognition, enjoyment, exercise by women of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the areas listed there: political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. And this has to be done irrespective of their marital status and on the basis of equality of men and women. So this is what means that if any of this, any action by the state results into nullification of human rights and fundamental freedoms in any of these areas, then it means it is a discrimination. So the three principles of CEDAW are that all are equal, there should be no discrimination, and state has the responsibility to ensure that this is provided for, this is secured. Right to equality. Do you know the difference between normative equality and substantive equality? You got a sense of that? We've been talking about it earlier.
Is normative equality similar to formal equality.
Mm-hmm.
So formal equality is providing similar conditions to uh, people irrespective of their status, irrespective of their where they stand, and substantive
So,
equality is considering all that things.
so when we say law faculty has got these many seats and anybody can apply, normative equality. There's no distinction. They're not saying only men can have 50% or 30% to this group or nothing. They're saying between everybody is equal to apply. Reservations, we are not talking about that at the moment, but when you look at the normative level, it's equal. It's everybody has equal opportunity depending on the merit that you will get admission. But when it comes to the substantive part of it, what we do find comparatively very few women are actually studying. When you look at our enrollment at the base level, 100% enrollment, normative equality. But we do know that as the level of classes go up, the the percentage of women dropping out is higher. So substantively, they are not provided the support to remain in this school. So we have secured normative equality, but not substantive equality. So we have said now fundamental right through education, primary education. So normative equality, everybody has the normative equality. But substantively, unless you have schools which are accessible to persons with disability, children with disability, unless you have got toilets for adults and girls, it will not result into actual retention of those people within the homes or actual continuation of their education. So normatively, we have assured equality, but substantively, we have still to go far. Non-discrimination, this principle opposes. So this is bifurcation we were talking about, distinction, restriction, and exclusion on the basis of sex. So when our constitution says no discrimination, and we say only men can apply for Navy, Army, Air Force, etc., is it amounting to discrimination?
Exclusion, ma'am.
Yeah, so we have got three categories. So they are excluded. But whether all exclusions will amount to discrimination? It says this should not be exclusion, should not be on the basis of sex. So whether, if you were the defender of this exclusion of women in the armed forces, how will you justify? How have we been all this while justifying? We have not said that this is violative of Article of Chapter 3 of the Constitution. On
Ma'am,
what?
it can,
Yeah.
ma'am, on point of, ma'am, the role which they are required to play, because if you see the military has to defend, and they are in the pace of aggression with other countries. So it is not suitable for women to be at that level.
So the
So,
discrimination is justified, exclusion is justified by reference to that it is not only the sex is not the criteria alone, but also the function which is required of. So certainly, and that is of course being challenged today, is a different thing, but that is how traditionally for all these centuries, we have excluded women from the armed forces, saying that armed forces is not only, so one is that once we have also the one of the constitution that you require strong men. Women as a group are seen to be physically less strong. So if they're physically less strong, so it is not because of the sex of the person, but because of the fact of their body. So that will be the additional categories. So we certainly need to, and all the categories where women were excluded, the judges have also, when there was challenge, it was always said that it has never, sex is not the only category. There are more. So when we talk about the personal laws also, so there's a lot of custom, you say social pressure, there are lots of other factors also playing a part, and it's not alone the sex alone which is deciding this question. Principle of non-discrimination, action or non-action that nullifies or impairs women's enjoyment of rights, anything which has the intention, purpose, which will or the effect will be discriminatory, and it helps to identify weakness of formal or neutral laws. So, principle of non-discrimination includes all these perspectives. It may, and we have known in our criminal law that act, the word act also means non-action. Non-action in what circumstances? When there is a legal obligation to act. So if there is any action or non-action that nullifies impairment of women's enjoyment of right, that is also violative of the principle of non-discrimination. Anything which has the effect, which has the intention, which has the purpose. So suppose if we say there's an advertisement which says all persons with the chest measurement of, I don't know what will be a good person, let's say 50, expendable to 56, are entitled to apply for becoming the firefighters. Normatively, non-discriminatory. Does it have the purpose of excluding somebody? We say no. We are wanting everybody who can do this. But when you look at the body build of the two gender, we'll find that very few women will classify, will fulfill that category. So whether the intention is to exclude women, a certain framework will say, no, we do not have an intention. We require people with this kind of lung power for them to survive in the fire extinguishing scenario. When there's a building on fire, fire, you need to do the firefighting work. So they're called fire case of Kerala State Electricity. I do not know what is this case. You want to elaborate? Prashant, madam, also a case of Kerala State Electricity Board. What is this case?
Ma'am? Ma'am,
What is it?
in this case, the discrimination on grounds of sex, the judges observed that the exclusion of women not exclusively based on sex, but taking into consideration peculiar nature of duties to be performed by electricity workers is not violative of
I
Article
believe that
15 of
is
the
that one where they had to ride bicycle and they had to climb the poles for electricity. Is it that
Yes,
case?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So today we are kind of beginning to examine all these stereotypical images of that what are the works women can do and which are the works which women cannot do. For firefighting, for example, certainly there was a time when you required this kind of physical, the lung power to survive in the smoke when it is a fire, the building is on fire. But today, firefighters usually will take this oxygen cylinder with them. So therefore, lung power is not relevant anymore. If you are able to carry, so what you require still is the ability to move around with a cylinder on your back. So certainly, there have been developments there because of it. So now we have got hydraulic lifts also, which can reach the poles. A lot of men are seen using the hydraulic lift to do the wiring work on the streets. So whether any scientific mechanisms which have now been adopted by the companies, by the boards we are talking about, if we do not change the initial criteria, not taking cognizance of, then it has the impact of, even though there's not no intention to exclude, but they're not applying their mind to say now because of these supportive mechanisms, even women can do the same work. So certainly things have to keep pace with, may keep changing. The requirements and the understanding of a particular profession may keep changing with the developments taking place in different areas. How to identify discrimination? It can be direct or it can be indirect. Directly, when we say fathers are the natural guardian, direct discrimination. Indirect, it happens when we do not take cognizance of the woman's work and say equal work for equal pay. So if a man is not able to do that equal work or cannot do that in the same circumstances because of family obligations, it results into indirect discrimination. Or the example I just gave about the firefighting, that indirectly we are excluding them by laying down the criteria in which women will not fit. Discrimination may be current, historic, structural, cross-cutting. So when you say current, we are talking about today. Historic, any example of historic discrimination against women? Historically, they have been deprived something.
Right to vote, ma'am.
India, we can't really say that.
The right to property, ma'am.
Right to property has been one example. Also, entry, becoming a priest in a temple. And presently we have this thing also that women cannot even, there is a Delhi High Court recent judgment where it says that women can at least collect the donations to the temple when it is her family's turn. So certainly there has been a historical category, structural, and we say that we create systems. So when we talk about judges, for example, when we said lawyers were not women, so there was nothing in the functionality of that, but the structures were created as such, or the work requirements. Structurally, with promotions are done to people who are very regular, who devote time beyond office hours, who can work on weekends, and women with small children, or women who are taking, or women who are pregnant, certainly cannot. But if you say that your CV has to show no, the employees who do not take leave are preferred over those who take leave. Women are required to take leave because of their family responsibilities. So structures, the norms for promotions are created in a manner which will result into discrimination against women. It may be cross-cutting, that across board, that it's not that when we say that historically or because of the Hindu law, women were not given property rights, but it has then impact on their ability to take decisions on their life also. So there is certainly intersectionality also because of the different status a woman may have. So she may be a disabled woman, she may be a minority woman, she might be a Dalit woman, she can be in our category, so even the wife is becoming a disability for various purposes. That somebody's wife, that is what itself results in. So again, understanding the whole structure. So distinction, exclusion, restriction on the basis of sex is one requirement. When we are looking at the whole article as such, it's a combination of lots of things. So it can be recognition, enjoyment, exercise of human rights, fundamental freedoms. And this is the same section bifurcated to just emphasize what is the range of things which are included in it. So what we're looking at is not only that there's a distinction, exclusion, restriction, it should also have the effect or purpose of. So whether sometimes we intend something, it results into something else. For example, we say today we are making lots of laws in which we are punishing the offenders committing serious sexual offenses against women. What is the impact of that? That is certainly not the purpose that then the judges will start acquitting, being interpretations which will lead to acquittal rather than conviction, because conviction would mean mandatory minimum and they don't want to do it. So unintended consequence of that becomes that. So sometimes it should be a direct purpose, or sometimes it may be the impact of nullifying the rights of the women in political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. So what we need to certainly focus on is, when you say enjoyment requires structural arrangements. So when we talk about, for example, today we say there should be flexi hours. So flexi hours allows women to adjust their family responsibility with their official responsibility as well. When we talk about job sharing, lots of structural changes are being now introduced. Very recently, we had this the Gamble and Proctor leave, the childcare leave, leave for care. I think that was the title. I forget now. So in that one, they're making structural arrangements to ensure that both men and women share the share the care. I think that was the title, share the care. So if we make structural changes in that, when we say, for example, commissions are women commission, we say the head will be a woman. So you are creating structures there which will be facilitating women's participation and enjoyment of various rights. The ideology, action, and intention leads to the results. Sometimes the ideology that women should be protected, they have this whole understanding of women's appropriate place being home itself results into actions which says restrictions on their movement, exclusion of their participation equally with in sports and other activities. And the intention may be the direct intention. Suppose the intention of the father or the mother who says to their young girls, do not go out alone. Their intention is not to restrict their enjoyment of right. Their intention or their motive is a lot more to provide protection to the girl. But what does it results into is different than what the intention was. So one has to make that understanding clear, that it is not only the intention of the person, but also what is the result of the action taken with a certain intention. Equality, we have already talked about this, formal equality and substantive equality. Substantive equality requires certain action to be taken. Formal equality requires only a norm to be declared. So the formal equality recognizes the difference, and it usually will say that there might be protection needed for them. But when it is substantive, we require correction. We need to provide, in fact, the equality, ensuring equality by removing the obstacles in that equality, or by providing support to the person so that they can participate equally. So it may require special measures, it may require enabling environment, it may require equality of opportunity, access, and result. All require redistribution benefits, transform unequal power relation, and it may the unequal transforming this one requires special measures to overcome historical barriers to recognize special needs. It may also be enabling conditions, socioeconomic support systems to provide access to opportunities, and this may be permanent and temporary. Can we think of any examples in the recent past where unequal power relations have been changed by law? Or any of these, when you say enabling conditions, socioeconomic support system?
Ma'am, the adultery law.
Yeah, unequal power relationship, that's a good example. Can you think of any on one where access to opportunities has been improved? When you say access to justice for women, what are the obstacles we find?
Ma'am, what about the sexual harassment law, even though it's not recent?
That few decades only recent only. So it is recent, yes. When you look at the Supreme Court judgment, it was a temporary measure which has now been made permanent through the legislation. But the Vishaka guidelines themselves said these are till the time the legislation comes in. So the judiciary made a temporary arrangement, and then the legislature has made it permanent. So recognizing the special need of women, because it is not that no man is ever sexually harassed at workplace, but the problem is much more faced by women. Almost every woman would have faced sexual harassment in the public sphere at one or the other occasion. So we have these measures of equality and equity. So in the first left side picture, We have 3 children, different sizes, and everybody is standing on the same platform. But that doesn't kind of lead to their equal access to the viewing of the match which is happening in the field. In the equity system, we said, okay, whoever requires has much support. So the tallest one's thing is taken and given to the smallest, and all of the 3 now are at the same height. So that's one manner in which you ensure. So that the first model is also equality. So we are saying we have given everyone same opportunity. If you can't see, it's your problem. If you are not as high, the problem is yours. In the equity, we said, no, we will provide protection. But what about this one? I really like this. The third one, you address the obstacle. You remove the obstacle, the other person don't require the support. They will enjoy the scenario with their own capacities and capabilities. But most of the time, we are stuck in the middle one, where we want to give, without addressing the structural problems, we try to provide support, and then it leads to a lot more unrest. Naturally, the person whose stand is taken away, he'll say, what is this nonsense? Why I was able to enjoy the view much more with the height. So removing that facility to me is actually not good for me. So this man is, this tall boy is objecting. But once you remove the obstacles, then nobody is claiming that my thing has been taken away. And I think that's what we need to identify, that it is the obstacles. And in our course, we are focusing on what is the biggest obstacles in equality among men and women is the patriarchal ideology. So unless you address that aspect, you keep on providing supportive laws. These are special laws for women. They will be given this, they will be given that. So certainly men are objecting. What is this nonsense? We are also harassed. We are also subjected to violence. Nothing is for us. So we are still stuck into the middle picture. But what we want to address is that if we start recognizing the obstacles which have been created in our vision by the patriarchal ideology, then only there will be more substantive equality. So state obligation, prohibit discrimination, amend laws, immediate realization, progressively there, and obligation of means and results. We have to focus on that also, that it leads to the result required. Change stereotyped roles. Any examples?
So, ma'am, I don't know if this is related, but there was this article I read in Harvard Business Review, which said that taking even structural accommodations, like for example maternity leave, can harm chances of a woman in a workplace. For example, what the article said was that taking longer maternity leaves for women hampers their chance at a promotion or an increase in pay, as opposed to when a man takes it, who's applauded for his initiative in raising his child. So I don't know if, like I said, if it's related, but I don't know how far even structural accommodations go to make
No,
at least the workplace
for me,
better for a woman.
the Gamble and the Proctor initiative is focused on change stereotypical roles, that it is a woman's responsibility. When you look at the general rule of childcare, it's a woman alone. Now they're saying share the care. So they are trying to change the stereotypical roles given to women of childcare. And that certainly is something which the state should be focusing on also. So they are the private companies has taken the initiative, but I think the other groups should follow. And the fourth, then there's a periodical report which the state has to submit about what have they done. When you look at, there are also obligations on the optional protocol, and the state has the obligation, 3 levels of responsibility. First of all, they need to create the normative standards showing respect to the concept of equality. Then they have to create the environment in order to fulfill that respect. It's just not a lip service. And they have to ensure that if, when we're looking at the transgender bill, the third one is missing. There's no mechanism available. But the state very categorically has been specifically obliged to provide mechanisms for effective enforcement of the law as well. So when you look at these ones, certainly each one of them, these state obligations apply equally to the transgender persons also. So even though we have recognized in case of women in 1970, what was the year? 79? So it's not that this is not known. These obligations have been there in the other parties as well, but we are still falling on the same rut of not wanting to change anything, even after making the law. Periodic reports. India has also submitted fourth and fifth report. I've not been able to find out whether we have submitted anyone after this as well. So this is the range of concerns which have been highlighted, the substantive provisions of rights against trafficking and sexual exploitation. We still know that in marital area, we have still not protected the married women from sexual abuse from the husband. Right to vote, somebody already pointed out, and this we have enjoyed for a long time and without any struggle actually. Equal representation in international meetings, UNO. Do we know any women who have been part of the UNO? Very high position. There are many at the lower levels, but very high
And
positions.
Vijay Lakshmi Pandit.
Vijay Lakshmi Pandit was the first one, and the second one, which still is there, is the Dr. Neeru Chadha, Judge of Laws, and so it's just symbolic. If after so many years we've got two women to name who are at the UNO level, certainly there's a lot more to work towards. So in private organizations, we're finding very many heads of a number of private big companies, but in the
Ma'am, the head of IMF is a woman as well.
I didn't catch head of
IMF, Monetary
IMF.
Fund.
Recently she has become the first woman.
Yeah.
So third one. So now got three. So but the number is not even 10 fingers are still not covered from 1979, and we kind of agreed in 1993. Nationality related rights. Previously, it was automatic that the wives will acquire the nationality of their husbands, but now they've been given a choice whether if they want to retain their own, they can retain it. They want to change it, they can change it. And if suppose the two parents are from two different countries with their nationalities, they have equal right. This is what the aspiration is. Which country have given it or not, I do not know about India as to what actually is the situation here. That if there is an Indian parent and there is a American wife, and their children have I think they're given the choices depending on where they're born, so they need to decide. Ultimately, the children have to choose on attaining majority. That's what I think position in India is. I do not know about other countries. Education-related rights, study and get degrees, get scholarships, participate sports, physical education, information and knowledge related to family planning. Remember when we were looking at the National Family Health Survey, the knowledge about HIV, AIDS, etc. was much less in the girls compared to the men. Right to employment, equal opportunity, freedom to choose employment, equal wages, maternity leave with pay, not to be given work harmful to pregnant women. We will want to focus on it in our subsequent classes. We will be focusing on right to maternity leave with pay. Do you think we have a right to maternity leave? What's your knowledge about this? Whether all working women are entitled to take maternity leave?
Yes, ma'am.
In Delhi University, the ad hoc women teachers are not entitled to. Delhi University, I'm talking about, forget about the other places. And despite the fact that we have this muster roll case in which the Supreme Court said that even a daily wage labor will have a right to maternity leave. But because the legislation itself is saying, is kind of very limited in its application, it is left to the individual institutions to adopt this. All working women are not entitled to, even by the statute. Health-related rights, family planning, prenatal, neonatal, postnatal care, sufficient food during. Do you know what is the extent of? So how is this the sufficient food during pregnancy and breastfeeding? But what about the food before the pregnancy? We have a very high rate of maternal mortality because the mothers are anemic. So anemia affects both men and women, but it affects the women a lot more because of their childbearing responsibilities as well. Like economic and family property, there's a long way to go. We had this initially when the government did the redistribution of land, the Chakbandi and all, then the land was given to landless farmers and all. So it was all given to men in the family. And later on, it was said that no, there'll be a joint patta because the men were just whiling away their property, and the property was given actually for the welfare of the family. They found that the men were not using that for the purpose, and women were left without any kind of access and control to that land. So there were recognition, and certainly there are more, unless they have any kind of control, and then they have to, if their husband dies, then whether she will, before the, especially when we did not have right of wives to succeed to the property. So lots of things are changing gradually, but still a long way to talk about. And we'll be looking at this in greater detail when we come to our subsequent chapters with the headings, the modules we need to cover. Rural women's rights, certainly we do require that rural women are at a more disadvantaged position in terms of access to anything, whether education, knowledge, opportunities. And so how would you look at the, what is that Abhiyan called? Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, in which we said toilets in every household. Whether that has got anything to do with specifically more to do with women? When you read rape cases, it is shocking the number of women who have been raped when they have gone to answer the call of nature. Or they have gone even in the homes when there are joint toilets. There is a chawl and there is a common toilet for every member in the chawl. They have been raped when they've gone to the toilet and come back, not having bolted or locked their room because there were other members of the family. They've been raped in those circumstances also. So certainly having your individual toilet is important, not only for sanitation purposes, but also for safety purposes for women. Equality before law, equal right to enter, contract and regulate property, equal protection of law, freedom of movement and choosing residence. We know lots of these are not available, not because of the law prohibiting, but because of the social and historical reasons. Marriage and family relations, freedom to choose one's life partner. What do you think? Do we have this?
Not really, but
yeah. So normatively is there, but the moment women choose, and we've got now various laws which are being used to stop women making their choice. So all these quote unquote love jihad legislation which are now coming up in different states. We have POCSO, which is talking about young adolescent girls not being able to make those choices, and the parents themselves control. If the girl has chosen a partner which they don't like, they use kidnapping and rape law and POCSO legislation, in order to get this whole thing stopped. Equality in married life, which certainly families are continuing to be hierarchical, supported by law also, not only a social practice. Divorce and separation.
Honor killing, ma'am.
Sorry?
Honor killing, ma'am.
Honor killing, certainly. And the social acceptance of honor killing. That's even more horrifying than actually only the horror killing. It's not in one family, but the community around that family also, which thinks, it is the right thing to do. Choose family name, profession, occupation. So today we know a lot of women after marriage, they want to retain their family name, and they do. You will find the one Bhattacharya married to one Sharma or somebody. But children still continue to be for taking the name of the father's family name rather than the mother's, even though the mother may have retained. Right to decide how many and when to have children. We certainly know women do not have the power to decide this aspect. Be guardian of one's children, women are not, even at a normative level. So then there are all this terminology which have been used. I'll skip this part. General recommendations are also there. And 19, which has been now updated by the General Recommendation 35, is an important one. You can have a look at that, which is focusing on violence against women. India has provided periodic report, and some of the things which they have highlighted in that report have been the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, for party rights being given, adoption, where married women have been given equal rights, the guardians and ward act, no guardian to be not there, then legal guardian had to be appointed, but now it says the mother also is not there, only then. Plantation Labor Act, the definition of family gender neutral so as to remove the distinction between the family of the male and female worker for availing dependence benefits. CRPC, certain changes have been introduced. The PP, special PP can be there for the rape victim. In-camera trials, protection of identity, aggravated rape leading to more serious, and even more after this amendment have also been introduced. 357, compensation to victims of crime, primarily rape. Maternity Benefit Act, 180 days. We do know, we've been looking at this and saying that it should have been the 2-year. Okay, first look at 180 days of leave to mother for care and protection of infants. What is the intention and what is the impact? When you keep on increasing the days of leave for the mother, and so, you did point this out, that when this happens, then it affects their promotions, more leave you take. And I keep on wondering about our Virat Kohli. He missed a very, very major event in cricketing history. And whether he has been ruing about that, or whether he thinks that no, taking the paternity break during that period was more important than having lost it. But that's the dilemma which women constantly face. And that's why a lot of career women do not want to have children, because they will lose out on equal opportunities to get promotions, to get exposure, and whatever other options are there to men when as they do not become pregnant and don't have to go through this whole scenario. And leave, again, reinforcing their care. So it's not a share, care, the share is not the concept, yes, which certainly at one level we'll say, oh, this facilitates women in their career. But at the same time, the flip side of that is that it also creates an obstacle in their careers. Compulsory education, right to free and compulsory education legislation has also been brought in. We have the forest dwellers' rights, and certain changes have been introduced there. The joint property is being created, right conferred upon under this act shall be registered jointly in the name of the spouses. And there should be 1/3 members. Senior Citizens Act also provides for maintenance of parents, leading to failure to do resulting to punishment. An important point has been recognized that the rights of women and children are intertwined. So if the mother is not healthy, the mother is not well, it impacts on the survival development both of children. And therefore, when we talk about the, stop sharing. So when we are talking about women's rights, it has, if we talk, so at one level we question why it is that always there is, wherever there is women, we talk about children. So Article 53 talks about women and children. Ministry is also women and child, but they are intertwined. It's certainly intertwined for those people, those women who have children. And that also put the pressure on all women to have children. So even if a woman doesn't want to have a child, she is seen as an abstraction in the whole thing. She's not seen that it's her choice. So even though normatively we do recognize, we do emphasize that they have to have that right, but actually the pressure is created by this whole intertwining. So one is a factual reality, the other is the impact of that factual reality, which imposes a very strong burden on the woman psyche to have children. So certainly that was the background material by reference to which then we will be examining our legislations in subsequent classes to see what extent the employment laws, in what areas women have been, at least the normative equality has been achieved, or there's been a step taken toward that equality in the areas of family, in the areas of criminality, in the areas, we have picked up certain areas. So we have IPC, the criminal law, then we are looking at economic equality, we're looking at domestic violence. What else are we looking at? There should be one more. We have in employment, we have criminal law, reproductive rights. They are the 4 areas of law in which we will constantly keep saying what is the norm and what is it what we have achieved and what still needs to be achieved. So actual implementation of all this normative discussion we have been talking about will start from day after tomorrow. So tomorrow we will look again at the normative category for third gender, for LGBT community, as to what Yogya Karta principles are provided for. And then we will start looking at the actual laws and judicial decisions and we are looking at celebrated judicial decisions, which are seen as progressive, achieving or striving to achieve equality. We will look at those provisions. So the cases we will read in this course are not what are the facts, what are the reasons, what are the arguments. But we will also, in addition to this, need to analyze and reflect will be, what is the approach? When we are looking at the law, we are looking at the scheme to find out whether this law is based on sameness approach. Is it based on difference approach? Is it protectionist? Is it still patriarchal? Similarly, we will look at the judicial decision also from that angle. That what are they, to what extent they are still guided by patriarchy in our minds, to what extent they were paternalistic, in what cases they have actually recognized the difference, in which cases they have applied the principle of sameness. So there are the 4 areas from 4 perspectives from which we will analyze the actual laws and judicial decisions after tomorrow. So tomorrow somebody should prepare a presentation, short presentation on Yogya Karta principle, including the +10 as to what are the areas, because the same issue is with LGBT also, the way we have said in case of CEDAW, that why did we require CEDAW? Because the general laws on human rights equality are not focusing on the special problems faced by a certain group of people. So LGBT have the same scenario, and LGBT can be across board, men and women both, biological men and women or biological non-women and women. And therefore, they are also constituting a whole class of people, may not be as many in number as women, because in women we say it's almost 50%. But in case of LGBT, even it's a smaller number, the problems are still that they are at an intersection. They are also not only intersection, they're also creating a separate class because some of them do not fall in the binary of men and women. So that's what we will do tomorrow. If you have any questions about today, any examples you want to give?
Ma'am, what about that thing we're talking about discrimination, exclusion, about that girl of Delhi Law University? She has been deprived to give the examination because she was on a leave because she was pregnant. And she, High Court or Supreme Court then allowed her to give the examination. But as a law college, don't it have the responsibility that she was a pregnant lady, तो उसका attendance नहीं हो पाया पूरा.
You know, there's a very complicated issue. I faced this as a dean in the faculty. So there was a girl who was pregnant, and our bar council rules not the university rules, they do not provide for pregnancy leave. And I certainly told this girl that there's a distinction between pregnancy leave and an accident. Accidents happen by chance. And today we do believe that educated people do plan their pregnancies. So they could, it could have been a planned pregnancy, it could have been unplanned. But usually we expect it to be a planned pregnancy. Then if you're doing a course with attendance required, you can prevent that. So the statement I was making to her was that we are unable to give we had students who had cancer. So there were 2 students who had cancer, and we could not give them benefit of even leave for a cancer student who is undergoing chemotherapy, etc. So I was saying to her that look at this scenario, cancer is not her doing, pregnancy can be my doing. So our rules are so strict that we are not providing, and it happened because of the manner in which the leave rules were misused by students. We previously had a lot of provisions for exclusion of, if there was a medical certificate, one could have taken exemption from that. And then students started producing left and right fake certificates. The faculty doesn't have the capacity to examine whether fake or not. Then the committee sat and found that completely fake certificates were there, and people were taking examination even with 0% attendance. So then they took away all the thing. And whenever somebody went to the court saying that, no, I was ill and I need exemption, the court said that for falling ill, 30%. So that is an arbitrary position. So personally speaking, I certainly think that we do need to have these leave. But if the law does not provide for it, then it becomes a very difficult scenario that to give it to a pregnant woman, but not to give it a student who is suffering from, accidents have happened, they're in cars, they cannot come to the faculty. What about them? So there's a whole range of people when it comes to the attendance and pregnancy. I certainly believe that unless it's when we say in what is that called, pregnancy, termination of pregnancy, MTPA. So MTPA does say that if it is accidental pregnancy, you can abort, because it does assume that pregnancy can occur despite precautions. 15% failure is out there. But the leave rules do not provide for that. So for me, it's not only, for me as an administrator at that point of time, the question was not only of the pregnant woman. The question for me was much wider, that there's a whole range of other students, genuine students, which we know they were ill. And they had no control over that. We could not give it to them as well. So it's a little, for me, it's a little difficult one. And the whole thing boils down to the responsibility of the people who are using that one. If you have a genuine case, you should certainly have the opportunity. I certainly believe that 1 semester absence from leave doesn't make you, very bright lawyer. Without, if you miss 1 semester, if you can still do that. But because the Bar Council insisted on no leaves and 70% and all that, and there's only one example, there may be any number of, but I certainly felt very bad for all those students who had accidents, who had serious illnesses, and we could not give them the leave either. So it's a much bigger issue than just the pregnancy of women. I will make that distinction that the woman still said, well, I was taking precaution, it still happened. And which any woman can say. We should recognize that. Why not? But unless the provision, there was just no discretion whatsoever with the deans or with the in charges. So people were doing that, because if the teacher concerned knows that the student is ill, they will mark him present. So that's also unethical, to mark a student present when they're not. So their provision should be at the discretion level. because the discretion was misused so very badly, both by the perhaps the administrators also who never paid attention to, and but also we do not have the mechanism to find out who was a genuine student asking for leave and who were all these fake thing. So harsh rule came because as a consequence of that. So okay, we meet tomorrow.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am.
Welcome.